Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. Welcome, Jen Guzman.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So right before we started to record, we were talking about exactly what we were going to talk through on this podcast today. And I had just gotten off a call with somebody who is literally in tears working her corporate job at, a government job. So it's not like she's working from home or anything like that, trying to hide in the corner to talk about her fertility journey. Right.
Mhm.
And I could resonate with this so much to this woman because although I was working from home when I was going through it, it is so consuming in your mind when you're going through a fertility journey and you're trying to either build a business or be an executive at wherever you are, or just even if you're flipping burgers somewhere,
Yeah.
at McDonald's and you're going through it. It consumes your mind. So Jen, talk us through your story and how it relates to fertility and going through the journey and being in the professional world.
Sure. No, really important topic. And there's been a number of topics lately that I've talked about in other professional women's groups about how much we're dealing with in our personal lives and trying to navigate that as we are leading teams, building businesses, serving others, being a mother, etc. So this is a timely discussion. First and foremost, I have managed and battled endometriosis. I didn't get officially diagnosed until I was 28, so almost 14 years ago. I do believe I had it as early as my teenage years, and that
Mhm.
it's the always the token answer from doctors. Just put you on the pill. Your painful
Right.
period, you're soaking through your underwear and pants. That's totally normal. Just put you on the pill. I have my own opinion and suspicion around the pill actually exacerbating the symptoms, but that's another story. So
And
over
for anybody listening, endometriosis is one of the most difficult things to diagnose. The average age or year span, I should say, is 7 years before somebody actually gets diagnosed with endo. So it's really important if you're having any symptoms that might seem out of the ordinary. And that's difficult too, because if they're your symptoms, you probably think, oh, it's normal, but it isn't normal. So if you're listening to this and hear some of these things to recognize, oh, that sounds familiar, start to do some digging on your end a little bit.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and Elizabeth, great point. First of all, at this point, it is 1 in 9 women are diagnosed with endo. The challenge is you can't be officially diagnosed until you have had surgery because it is not, the adhesions are not seen on MRI, ultrasound, or CAT scan, any kind of scan. So unfortunately, it has to get to such a point where they open you up. And so my first
Mhm.
surgery, and when I was officially diagnosed, was in 2010 at 28. And they removed at that time 16 fibroids. On scan, they saw 3 fibroids. And then they got in and there were 16. And that's when I was officially diagnosed. Since that time, I've had about 6 or 7 I've lost count at this point. 6 or 7 subsequent surgeries for
Mhm.
endometriosis. One in 2018 that actually ended up resulting in an appendectomy at the same time because
Mm.
the endo had grown on to my appendix.
Right. So
And
that's
then this,
another thing I was going to mention, Jen, is
yeah,
I think a lot of times people don't recognize or realize that endometriosis can actually go into other areas of the body and not just be on the fallopian tubes or wherever you might
reproductive, yeah.
traditionally think that it is. And so sometimes if you feel back pain or you feel pain when you're going to the bathroom or something else, um, And that is one of the reasons that it's so difficult to diagnose is because it's not, as Jen mentioned, it's not able to be seen on the scans, and it can be misdiagnosed as, oh, you just have back pain, oh, you just have stomach pain, and really there's endometriosis growing in your system. So
Exactly. And that's this most recent surgery, what ended up happening to me. And this is what is so alarming that so many people don't know what's happening. Last January, I'd gone in because I had an infected, what's called an endometrioma, which is a cyst filled with blood and fluid and tissue. And I had gone in for that to be removed, and ultimately my surgeon, who's a top surgeon here in Chicago at Northwestern, he's the chief of gynecology, had said, hey, we're going to go in and we're going to do a hysterectomy this time, I think.
hmm,
And it was very hard I'm a woman who has gone through 8 rounds of IVF as a single woman in order to be a mother. And so hearing that that's how abruptly my fertility journey was going to end was devastating. And then I reflected on it overnight before surgery and realized no matter what, I'm going to be a mother. And so if that means that I have the privilege to adopt, that's wonderful. But I need to be a healthy mother. And so if having a hysterectomy allows me to be healthy and not in another hospital all the time, I accept it.
hmm,
Long story short, the hysterectomy didn't happen because when they got in, my uterus was attached to my lower intestine because of the endo. And
hmm,
when they separated the two, they perforated my bowel. And it
oh,
became a life threatening surgery,
oh dear,
and thankfully they stopped the surgery, tagged in colorectal, they did a bowel resection, and I ended up being in the hospital for almost a month. And so when we
wow,
talk about, I'm glad that you said, endo can grow onto other organs and outside of your
hmm,
reproductive organs. And I can't tell you how many women I have met that have ostomy bags. Luckily, thank God I did not need one. But there are other women that are having this exact same thing happen to them,
right,
and no one is, I shouldn't say no one, but not enough people are talking about this. And
hmm,
so going back to the top and your question, so many of us are leading teams of people. So during my time at my last organization, which was an HR outsourcing firm, we built and sold that firm. We built it from 150 clients to 500, 45 employees to 150. And during that time, I was accountable for, call it revenue. So client experience and client retention. And I had an organization of about 20 or so people. I had 5 direct reports, but my organization was 20 or so people. And so I'm leading teams. I had a portfolio of clients that I was also serving. And all the while, I'm dealing with endometriosis and surgeries and getting back to work. And for me, I've never been one to ask for help, which is something that I'm personally working on. I wish I would have worked on it sooner during that time, but so many women are dealing with this and have to, like you said about your last conversation, having to cry in a corner about the things that we're dealing with because we're
right,
afraid that someone's going to judge us, or we're afraid that our boss is going to think we're incapable of doing the job, and
right.
it's added stress that you just don't need when you're trying to navigate health journey.
100%. And I think because there's this underlying, I don't know if, I mean, part of it is shame, but also it's
Mhm.
very personal, right?
Mhm.
It's not like a broken arm that everybody sees that you're walking around to say, oh, I'm so sorry you broke your arm. That must really hurt. It's all internal, right? And you're not, it's not like you're going to walk around and say, oh, guess what just happened to me? I just bled through, whatever, or
Right.
I'm having cramps and I can't come in today because it just becomes a conversation that we're not used to having. And part of what this movement that I try to bring to the table is also for the corporations to understand in women's health there are so many things to be aware of and sensitive to, and not to say this group of people needs more attention than that, no, but just to have an awareness that just by our biological makeup, there are more things that are going on. So to expect us to, you know, sit at the same table and do all the things, yes, can we? For sure. But there's also other under underlying things that could be going on sometimes that people need to be sensitive to. During COVID, I had patients that were getting more time off for COVID than they did for miscarriage. And that's where I
Yeah,
was just like, this is insane and this has to stop. We need to have people be more informed on what it takes to go through this, what's happening to the body that's going through this, and whoever needs to support them. I certainly
mm,
couldn't be home by myself. I needed somebody there to help me. And if that meant my husband needed to take off time from work, then that's what needed to happen. But this across the board understanding that there's always a little bit something that may be going on that we need to understand at a deeper level to say, oh, it's not Jen's work performance that is
right.
hindering her. There's something else going on that maybe we don't fully understand.
Really well said. And the front end of my career was in the HR and talent space. And so many times I see, and I'll challenge my clients now. I do independent consulting, more interim COO work. But anytime I hear a leader of a team or a business owner say, like, this person was a really great performer and now they're not hitting their number or now they're not performing the same, I'm going to put them on a PIP. I'm always like, which is a performance improvement plan. I'm always like, hold the phone. Have you
Mhm.
just actually asked them if they're okay? Because if somebody's a high performer and suddenly goes to not performing, I can bet you there's something deeper that's happening that could be health related. It could be
Right.
maybe they're caring for a loved one who's dealing with a health challenge. You just don't know. And so, what you're highlighting, Elizabeth, is that people have this need to just learn empathy and to have the courage to ask the question. You know, the surgeries that I went through during my time at Empower and earlier on in my career as well was one thing. But I remember there was this one day I was going through IVF and I had just done a transfer. And I was driving to a client fundraiser at the Drake Hotel in downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And I got the call from the nurse that the transfer didn't take. And I always knew
Mhm.
because we always talked and were very casual with one another. And they'd be like, hey, Jen, how's your day going?
Mhm.
Anytime they would, when I would answer the phone, if they said, may we please speak to Jennifer Guzman, very officially,
Right.
I knew it right then and there that it didn't take.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I remember getting that call that the transfer had failed. And I had to quickly compartmentalize, put on a brave face, and go into that client fundraiser when I was broken
Ugh,
inside.
yes,
And it's happening every day, and people don't even get it. They don't
I
understand.
know. But I do think that having these conversations help to let people know, like, "Hey,
Yeah,
how are you doing? Actually, not that great. I just got a call that really devastated me," right? And that's what I want to open the invitation to people to do and say. Same as having a loss, right? To me, the failed transfers are like that, right? Because you start to get that story in your head of what life's going to be like, and transfer happened on this date, you're going to deliver on that date. Like, we already know the math in our head of what's
yeah,
when things are happening and whatnot. And knowing that if we have that freedom to be honest with those around us, even if they're strangers, most of the time they're going to be like, oh, my cousin just went through that, or my neighbor is going through that, right? But it frees us, and it also frees the people around us to know if they do ever go through something like that, they're not alone. And I think in years past, it has always been something that hasn't really been talked about, right? Like, when I was going through it and whatever, it wasn't an open
right.
conversation. There wasn't social media, people talking about their fertility and whatnot. And now it is more, I don't want to say a day-to-day conversation, but it's not unusual for somebody to talk about their struggles with fertility, thank goodness.
Yeah,
But to that deeper level, like you said, to have to switch it on and switch it off and put it in a box during that time, that alone causes trauma, right? You're
yes,
basically signaling to your nervous system, nope, not okay to feel that right now. And you need to put on this mask of somebody else that you just can't be, and step into that space. And the expectation that people have on men and women to do that is, in whatever it is that we're going through, is really unacceptable, I feel like, anymore. The
Yeah.
human connection now is our currency, is the best currency we can have. And the more we embrace that and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that you went through that, Jen. Is there anything I can do?" Even if it's in a work environment, that goes so far, right? You will never forget that person at a work event that's saying, "Is there anything that I can do to help you?" That is not relevant to work in that moment. So I think it is such a funky thing to navigate when you're going through any health crisis and dealing with work. The unfortunate thing with fertility is that it often extends longer than we expect it to, right? I think people say, "Okay, I'm finally going to do IVF,"
Right.
and they think it's going to be one and done and they're going to move on with their life. And sadly, that's not the case for most people. So can you take us through the rest of your story of
Yeah.
trying to conceive?
Absolutely. And just to build on what you just said, there were multiple rounds that I didn't want people to know because I didn't want to have the pressure of telling them that it didn't work.
Sure.
The challenge is when you're in a high profile role and always on and always showing up, and all of a sudden you're not. I was insecure about having to explain to people what was happening because
Of
I wasn't
course.
being myself. But I also realized, I mean, I'm in my early 40s now, but I had a team that were mostly younger women, anywhere from mid 20s to early 30s, that I felt compelled to start sharing so that they would feel less alone. And so
Right.
fast forward to now, we did save one of my ovaries in that surgery last year, but I am not actively trying to conceive, but I am on an adoption journey,
Amazing.
um, which similar to IVF is very lonely and scary, especially as a
Mhm.
single woman. It's very overwhelming. There's a lot to learn. It took me kissing a lot of frogs in
Mm.
meeting agencies that I felt comfortable with. But again, similar to when you're vulnerable and share the path that you're on, suddenly there's this crop of people that are like, "Oh, I went through that," or "My brother went through that. Let me introduce you to so and so." And I've had so many conversations with people who didn't know me that were just connected to me
Right.
through other folks that were like, "We're willing to give you the playbook or tell you what to be aware of." And so getting used to asking for help in those things has been enlightening and positively overwhelming. Like I didn't
Beautiful.
think that there would be that many people willing to help, and they've taught me so many things, and it's been amazing. Now I'm in the home study part of the journey, and once I check all those boxes, then it's called being paper pregnant, meaning that you are eligible to be on a list and be evaluated as a potential mother. So it's exciting. It's exciting, and it's a privilege to be able to do that, and a blessing to be able to do that.
That is exciting. And I think such a different, again, path to learn about, right? Just like when you're going down fertility, you're learning a whole new master's degree, I feel like, in something that you never thought you would know so much about. And then same with going down adoption. And that's the beauty of community when people are able to help you to say, "Here, try this," or "I talked to this person." I mean, the first thing that I thought of is I interviewed on the podcast a long time ago, a couple of years ago, maybe, the CEO for the
Oh yeah.
Pear something, the app. But she talks about her story and how she created this situation and the differences between going through an agency and just going through this app, which is basically like match.com for, expected parents and the pregnant woman. And it was so fascinating because it's, again, a whole nother world. It's a whole lot to understand and educate yourself on, but also such a beautiful experience. And I think that there's you get to make the choice, right? Is this going to be a path that's a blessing, like you said, or is it going to be one that's difficult? I spoke to somebody recently that they're like, we're not going to do adoption. All my family says yada yada, and basically convince them that it was not the right path for them. And I thought, how sad, because you basically convinced yourself that it's this outcome for yourself rather than just taking this step forward and seeing what could bring for you.
Right.
Of course, we all know stories of everything, both sides, right? We've all heard stories that adoption didn't work out. We've all heard stories that IVF didn't work out, but we've also heard amazing millions of stories with families that have had full families that have been adopted and full families from IVF and all the things, right? So it's where you choose to put your energy and attract that back to you that I think we have a gift to do and make a choice in our own life.
I totally agree. And motherhood in general, or parenting in general, has so many risks. Just being able to adopt or conceive or whatever is one part. But being a parent, and I think about this all the time, I talk about it with friends. Like, I wait for the moment that my child comes home upset that somebody's hurt their feelings at school and I got to navigate it, right? Like, the mama bear in me is going to want to be like, go tell off a kid. But those are all risks. And so it's just disappointing to hear, if you make that choice that you don't want to take that risk, I get it. But to have been convinced by an outside party is what scares me for that person, because I hope that they don't feel regret about that at a later date.
Right. And I think that's where, with all things in life, as far as can you walk away from it and say, I wish I would have,
Right.
and feel okay about that. Most of us can't. We need to see what the path holds for us in order to say, no, I tried it and I realize I'm ready to go down a new path, so that we don't feel that regret. But can you tell us how that's gone for you so far? As far as how did you start to say, okay, I'm going to open this next book? Because I think that's an important story to tell for people who have gone through trying to conceive on their own for so long to then say, what is next, right? Is it adoption? Is it surrogacy? Is it something else? So how did you decide, okay, maybe this is the next step for me?
I had a very close friend say to me while I was navigating IVF, there are multiple paths to get to the ocean. And whether that's Route 66 straight
Mhm.
west to Los Angeles or Southern California, or whatever it is, train, plane, car. The point is, I knew I was going to be a mother regardless. And my my mom left at a very young age, and I was raised by my dad, who's a Mexican immigrant, and my Jewish grandparents. So I'm a Mexijew.
Mhm.
And my Jewish grandparents, my grandmother really, for lack of a better term, adopted me when my mom left. And she adopted me earlier than that too. But like, to be able to give that gift back to a child is completing that story for me. That's
Mm,
one. And
awesome.
two, I consider myself to be a pretty smart and savvy person, but I'm not going to lie, it is a lot of work and it is intimidating. And what I first needed to do, I've been seeing the same therapist for 9 years. I see her every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I needed to conquer the fear that it wasn't going to work, because I was so and you talked about this a few minutes ago. When you suppress your feelings about an IVF transfer failing,
Mhm.
that doesn't go away. It gets
Right.
pushed down, but I can assure you it shows up later on.
Mhm.
And my last rounds were in 2021, and I was petrified to start the adoption. It took me a minute to get started because I was petrified that it would fail. And
Sure.
again, even if adoption fails, then I'll go down another path.
Right.
Because I know it's my calling to be a mother. But I will tell you, overcoming that fear, and fear is such a blocking energy. Once I opened the door to say, I'm going all in on this, is when all these different components of people wanting to help and getting connected to better attorneys and better resources started to happen, because I basically told the universe, like, all right, I'm all in now and I'm not afraid
Mhm.
anymore.
That's awesome. I heard somewhere this week that you this woman was giving an analogy of horses that are wild horses, and you can be on the disappointment horse or you could be on the fear horse or whatever, and you can get on just as easy as you got off. So if that horse is on the disappointment, if you're on the disappointment horse because that's the one you've seen a few times because of whatever reason, whether it's relationships or IVF or whatever, you can still choose to get off of it and know that it's still there, and the opportunity to get back on potentially is there, but you can get off and straight to go on the other direction. And I thought that was really good, because sometimes we feel like that fear or disappointment is inevitable and we're not going to know anything else. But the truth is, we won't know anything else unless we try something else.
Well
And
said.
part of that is just taking that courage to take the step and know I could potentially get hurt, right? It could
Yeah.
happen, but the risk is greater to take that step. So I am so excited for you. I cannot wait to hear how your story ends. Please keep us posted. How
Thank
can
you.
people find you and learn more about you?
Sure. The name of my business is Bestola, which is named for both of my grandmothers, Bess and Bartola. So you can find me on Instagram at Bestola Collective, or Jen at bestolaconsulting.com. Happy to
Amazing.
connect with anybody.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and bringing more awareness to all of these things. It's been so fun chatting with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.